Welcome to Beveler USA. Today we're going to do an instructional video on how to set up a UZ50 TRIUMPH. Now we'll go over some of the features and benefits of the UZ50. The machine is capable of beveling 4-inch plate with a 2 1/4 inch bevel. Angles can be set from 15 to 60 degrees very easily. It's just a simple matter of tilting the machine back and forth. The machine will also flip 180 degrees to do a double bevel, so you don't have to flip your plate to do a K bevel or a double bevel. And there is also a variable speed control for the feed rate of the machine. The machine also comes with a remote control that sets your travel speed and your on and off, as well as a safety stop. The first step in adjusting the machine for use is establishing the angle of your bevel. We do that by looking at the gauge on the machine. There's a gauge on both sides, and there are 4 Allen screws, 2 on each side. They're adjusted by the Allen wrench that comes with the machine. We're set at 30 degrees right now, and we'll set the machine for 45. Tighten up the screws. And now our angle is set. Now that we've established the angle of our bevel, we want to set the 0 point for the cutter head. And to establish that, we have to do several adjustments here. The first thing that you want to do is you want to make sure that the rotation of your cutter head is correct. Looking at the cutter head will rotate in a counterclockwise position. The cutters need to engage in the material. So what we'll do is we'll make sure that our drive wheels are dropped in their lowest position. We come to the back of the gearbox, and we want to back the cutter head all the way into the gearbox till it stops to that point. We want to make sure that when we engage the machine into the plate, that the cutter head doesn't hit the plate. So we bring the machine into the plate. We want to make sure that the back guide fence is tight against the vertical edge of the plate. And then we lower the machine down. Now the guide plate is sitting flat on the plate. So now we can establish the 0 point for the cutter head. We want to turn the machine on. And we're going to extend the cutter until it just touches the plate. And that will establish our 0 point, or the point of reference to begin our first pass. Okay, now we've established our 0 point. Okay, we've established our job. The plate that we are going to bevel is 1 inch or 25 millimeter material. We have a 45 degree bevel angle, and now we've determined that our land or our toe will be 5 millimeters. So that leaves us with a 20 millimeter height of the bevel. So from there, we will go back to the chart and we will look at how many steps it takes to establish this bevel. Okay, now we come back to the chart that's mounted on the back of the machine. We're at 45 degrees and we are at 20 millimeters for the height of the bevel. So we come down on the chart and we come to 70.5. That's the number of marks that we are going to set for the total bevel on the machine. Now the maximum cut on the machine is 25 marks or 5 millimeter. So what we're going to do is we're going to divide that by, we've established that it's going to take 3 cuts to perform the bevel that we want on this material. So the maximum is 25 again. or 5 millimeters, but 25 marks. So we're going to divide this job in, rather than 25, 25, and 20, we're going to divide it by 24, 24, and 22. 24 will be the first cut that we make. We go back to the dial on the machine, on the gearbox that extends the cutter head through the gearbox. So for this case, we're going to say that our starting point or 0 point is 1. So we're going to do 2 full rotations, that's 20, and then back to 5, which is 24. That will be our first cut. Then we go back, then we have to do our second cut at 24. So we're starting at 5 with our second cut. We'll do 2 full rotations and then 4, so that will be 6, 7, 8, 9 will be at 48 marks for our second cut. And then our third cut will be 22. So we're starting from 9 on the third cut, and we'll do 2 full rotations and then 2, which actually brings us back to 1 as our final point for our third cut. So here we're going to look at another example of how to use the chart to set the machine for the steps of your bevel. We're at 25 millimeter plate, but we're going to do it, we need a 3 millimeter land. So that leaves us with 22 millimeters for the height of the bevel, again at 45 degrees. So we come back to the chart and we see we don't have 22 millimeters on here. So we need to establish our cuts. So we know that at 45 degrees and 20 is 70 marks, and that can be done in 3 cuts. The maximum is 25. So we have to make up those additional 2 millimeters for the 22. So we take 20 and we add 1. This is 1 millimeter. We come down, it's 3.5. So we need 2 times 3.5, which gives us 77. So now that we know we have 77 marks to get to our final cut. So in order to do that, what we're going to do now is we're going to look at dividing that evenly among 4 cuts. Now, you could do this cut with a maximum of 25 marks. You could do 25, 25, 25, and 2, but for the machine, it's better to set it incrementally 20, 20, 20, and 17 marks. So we will have a total of 77 marks to establish our 22 millimeter bevel on this plate using this scenario. Now we're going to establish our first pass, or the depth of cut for the first pass. So our starting point was 7. We want to make sure that the spindle lock is loose, and we are going to go to 24 marks as we established in our scenario on paper. That's 1 full mark, or 1 full rotation, 10 marks, 20 marks, 21, 2, 3, and 4. So we are at 24 marks, and now the cutter head is engaged far enough for our first pass. We want to make sure we lock the spindle in position. The cutter head can move in and out when it's on the material if it isn't locked in place. So you want to make sure you lock it after every step. Okay, the next step in our setup process will be to adjust our drive rolls for the proper tension on the plate. We do that by way of this hand wheel. We have a gauge on the side of the machine, and we use the pointer, we use this part of the gauge plate for this purpose. So we're at 25 millimeters on the plate, and you always want to adjust 5 millimeters less than the thickness of your plate. So we're at 25 millimeters for our thick plate thickness. So we're going to adjust our drive rolls to 20 using this pointer. That establishes the proper spring tension for the drive rolls so you get a good engagement. And it is very important that you set this before you engage the machine onto the plate. You need to have this first drive roll engage and pull the machine onto the plate. If you don't do it that way, you have the possibility of damaging the cutter head. Now that we have our cutter head adjustment done and our drive motor adjustment done, now we can engage the machine on the plate. By doing so, we need to bring the machine over to the plate and pull it over to it, and we can see that the machine is tilting down on the plate. So the best way to adjust for that is put your foot on this bottom rail, and it's very easy to adjust it. So we want to get it pretty close to parallel or to flat on the plate. Bring the machine over. Now we need to come up a little bit. We want to bring the machine over until we're against the first drive roll. Now we'll lower the machine down on the plate until it sits flat. We want to make sure our back guide plate is also engaged tight against the plate. Now when you start the machine, it's going to get noisy, so we'll explain this before we start the machine. But the best position to be in is one hand on the motor handle and another hand on the carriage. What you want to do is you want to pull the machine into, let that first drive wheel engage on the plate, and hold the machine and make sure that your back plate is still engaged until your second drive roll engages on the plate. Once your second guide or drive wheel engages on the plate, then you can let the machine do the work. Now we're going to start the engagement or the speed of your drive rolls between 3 and 4 on your speed adjustment on your remote pendant. Well, we finally reached the point where we're actually going to do a bevel with the machine. We've got all of our settings in place, so here we go. Some very important points when you're engaging the plate and when you're leaving the plate. The machine, as one drive roll exits the plate, the machine becomes a little unstable. So you need to make sure that you have control of the machine. When you get to the end of the plate, you want to slow it down a little bit and make sure that you maintain contact with the plate on the vertical guide rail. So those are two very key important points when you engage the plate and when you exit the plate. Slow down engaging, and slow down in exiting the plate, and make sure that you have the machine in a stable position. Okay, when we disengaged from the plate, you might have seen that the machine, we slowed the machine down so we could gain stability with the machine holding on to the manipulator. And if you notice, then the machine sped up. Once the cutter disengages from the plate, you can adjust your travel speed all the way to 10 and move it away from the plate at a faster rate of speed. Okay, now we've done our first bevel, our first pass, first cut, so to speak. Now we need to adjust for our second cut. So the only adjustment that we need to make at this point in time is we need to engage the cutter head another 24 marks, just like we did the first time we did 24 marks. So now we're at 1, so we're going to do 2 full rotations. 1, 2, and then 4 more marks, which takes us to 5. So now we're set for our second pass. Make sure you lock the spindle into place. Okay, before we do our third and final pass, we want to make sure that the settings that we have are correct for the final results that we need on our bevel and our land. So what we'll do is we'll check your land and make sure that we know that on the third pass where we need to be with the land. And if it's not quite accurate to what we need, then we can always come back to the chart and we can adjust our settings to get that final depth of cut and establish the land that we want to achieve. Okay, now we're ready to set our machine for the last pass. So we did 2 passes at 24, and now we're going to do our last pass at 22. Remember to lock the spindle in place. Okay, now that we're done with our bevel, let's talk about some additional features of the UZ50 TRIUMPH with the manipulator. The carriage or the manipulator is designed to let the machine float on the material. Let's say you have an unevenness on the floor, maybe a little bit of warping in the plate. The machine carriage will ride up and down with the plate. It will also compensate once you get it on the plate, and maybe there's some waviness. You can loosen this, and then the machine will float with the plate. You also have the ability to invert the machine 180 degrees. Let's say you're going to do a double bevel or a K bevel. You can rotate the machine simply by disengaging the locking pin. Make sure all of your controls and wires are out of the way, and then lock it back into position. And then your machine is ready to do your other bevel. Of course, you're going to have to make your adjustments just like you would for your first pass, but it will be inverted. And just make sure you keep the chip box closed. Now your chips are not going to fall into the chip box in the bottom, so you'll have to make sure that you keep the area clean and free of debris to let the machine travel on the floor without any obstacles. I think that pretty much covers the machine. All of these details are in the operator's manual. Thank you for watching what we hope was a very informative video on how to set up the UZ50 TRIUMPH. We hope that it makes your experience with the machine much easier initially. And my name is Ernie Leopold. I do technical support for Beveler USA. And if you have any questions or concerns, anything that might come up, you can always give us a call. Thanks.